Good morning, everyone, and thanks for connecting with us. My name's Nick, and I am with the Northwest Tri-County Intermediate Unit. And we wouldn't be able to have this connection with this professional today, Emily Ferguson, if it wasn't for our partnership with the Northwest PA Job Connect. So shout out to them. Special thanks to them for helping us establish these contacts. So we have with us today Emily Ferguson. She's a staffing specialist at Sarah Reed's Children's Center, and that is in Erie, Pennsylvania. I'm going to send Emily live here in a second, but I also want to point out to all of our attendees that somewhere on your screen, you're going to see like a little chat bubble with a question mark in it. We're going to have the first 10 or 15 minutes, just a conversation with Emily and I about her career, some positions there, etc. But we also want to hear questions from you. So do not hesitate to ask Emily any questions. We'll address those towards the end. You can ask them anytime throughout this conversation. So we want to hear from you, and Emily wants to hear from you. So without further ado, we're going to send Emily live. And Emily, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your position at Sarah Reed and what Sarah Reed does?
Yeah, so Sarah Reed Children's Center is a children's mental and behavioral health organization, and we work with kids between the ages of 3 and 18 in a variety of different capacities. So whether that's outpatient behavioral health therapy or a school program, school assistance, and then we also do have a residential treatment program where we work with kids between 5 and 18. So we have a variety of different programs. My journey with Sarah Reed actually started 3.5 years ago. I started as a clinical care staff, working directly with teenagers and little boys in the residential units. And then after a year of that, I took on this position as a staffing specialist, where I do a lot of recruitment. I'm working with primarily our school programs, so I recruit for those programs. I also do like a new employee processing, orientation, and then I have the opportunity to do a lot of other extracurricular tasks like social media, rewards and recognition, different events. So I have kind of a very diverse job here.
Sounds like you do. Wow. And so let's back up a little bit. Let's talk about what Sarah Reed does. You said that they're a behavioral and residential. Can you help? Do you maybe go into a little bit more detail there? What's the difference between residential, non-residential, and behavioral issues that you guys might be working with?
Yeah, it's really confusing, and a lot of people maybe not understand all that we do. So we're actually a trauma-informed care. We're certified trauma-informed care. So we work with kids who have gone through, trauma that ranges from maybe just neglect and abuse all the way up to more serious traumas. So we provide different services that match their needs. So we have outpatient programs where they're meeting with therapists, or even a therapist will come into their school. We also have a number of school programs that we run where kids who are maybe not finding the most success in their home school maybe need more one-on-one support, emotional support. We provide education and mental health services to them. We do have an acute program, so it's a short-term program for maybe a student who's really struggling. Maybe they've recently had something traumatic happen to them and they need some intense assistance. And then our residential program is probably our most well-known program. And we have 5 different living units on a campus. And these are kids that receive intensive behavioral and mental health services. We have staff that are working in the unit to help run groups. We do different activities. We have a rec department that does amazing things with the kids, different projects and activities. And then they live here with us for a number of months until they're maybe ready to transition to a lower step program.
Okay, so that's what I'm hearing. Okay, that explains a lot for me. So you have kiddos that are maybe suffering from mental or behavioral issues, and yeah, there's certainly circumstances that can happen to anybody. And at that young age, it's so important that you have that support for those kiddos so they can transition and get the help they need. That's very admirable.
Absolutely. Our trauma-informed care model is called the Sanctuary model. It's an international model. It's used around the world, mostly in the U.S. But we always ask, instead of what's wrong with the child, we ask what happened to a child. So it's never the child's fault, but we work through their trauma, and staff at all levels of the organization are really helping these kids on their mental health journey.
That's a great point. I've heard that before. You don't ever ask what's wrong with somebody. You say what has happened. That's great advice. So, Sarah, why don't you? I'm sorry, Sarah. Emily, why don't you talk to us a little bit about some different positions that are at Sarah Reed?
Yeah, definitely. So we recruit at all levels of education. So we have positions for folks that have maybe just their high school diploma and GED, all the way up to doctorate level positions. Our most common positions are our direct care. So these are staff that are either called like clinical care staff or behavior counselors. So these are staff that are in the trenches with the kids. They're working one-on-one. They're making that big impact. Most of the time, depending on the program, duties vary, but they're running groups with the kids, coming up with activities, documenting their mental health progress. There's a lot of training involved, so you're really exposed to a lot of different types of treatment models and behavior models. So it's really, you get a lot of education in this type of position. So most of our staff coming on, and that's how I started with clinical care. So again, working with the kids. We also have medical departments at 2 of our programs. So we do have registered nurses that work for us, and they're working with the psych doctors during appointments. They're also doing general kind of first aid, I say like school nursing, addressing needs, fixing boo-boos, that kind of thing. We do also have a number of certified teachers in our program. So these are these are teachers that really enjoy special education. So they're looking at really innovative ways to teach. These are kids that really struggle with traditional education. So our teachers have to think on their feet, come up with different activities, especially this year with the pandemic. It's how do we teach virtually while reaching the students. And then we also hire master's level therapists. And licensed and non-licensed. So these are, they've gone through a significant program and they work with all of our kids. So, and then of course we have our doctors, our psychiatrists here, and our psychologists as well. So definitely a diverse group of staff that has to collaborate and really work together.
And your title as a staffing specialist, I assume that you are filling those positions?
Yes. So I primarily recruit for our partial hospitalization program and our Erie School District programs. So I'm working and getting behavior counselors, teachers. I also help recruit for our maintenance department, so I'll fill like a custodian position or a laundry aide position as well. And then I assist the other recruiter. There's 2 of us, and she does primarily the residential program, so I'll assist her as needed as well.
So all those people that work, you're kind of the person behind the scenes that puts those people into place.
Yes. I'm the person reading the resume very quickly when you send it in and then deciding, okay, this is where you'll fit. And then I'm the person that calls you. So that's my first contact with someone is reading their resume.
I'm sure you have some stories about some good and bad resumes.
Yeah.
Conversation for a different time. But why don't you tell us a little bit about working at Sarah Reed? What are some abilities and interests that somebody must have in order to be a good fit at Sarah Reed?
I think regardless of the position or the level or even the program, this agency really is about, caring for the kids. So you have to have a great level of empathy, but also a great level of professionalism and being able to practice self-care. When you're working with these kids, sometimes you take on their trauma a little bit too. So being able to, take care of yourself, practice your own self-care, make sure you're, not taking on too much baggage. It's also high stress tolerance. Working with kids, regardless of mental health diagnoses or not, can be exciting and challenging. So it's, having a high stress tolerance, thinking on your feet, being able to pivot quickly if something doesn't work. I think regardless of where you are in this organization, you have to have that. And I think in general, in today's workforce, especially right now, just being able to be very flexible and kind of meet your job needs regardless of the circumstances is so important.
So I'm hearing a lot of, you need to be a people person and have kids at the center of your heart.
Yeah.
And patience as well, because you could be dealing with some kiddos that have had some serious trauma happen to them.
Right.
You need to be compassionate and empathetic for them.
Right. And then also in terms of kind of the paperwork or more pencil paper skills, definitely having an attention to detail. A lot of our staff, if not all, have to do some level of documentation on the mental health progress of each student, or forms for school districts. So there's a lot of paperwork. So it's being that attention to detail. It's proper grammar even is really important. So just kind of those skills are also crucial in any role in our agency.
That seems to be a pattern we're getting with all the professionals with which we connect, is that that professionalism with the English language arts. Let's talk a little bit about that. Is that a particular skill set? So if you have somebody at the entry level position interacting with a kiddo, is there documentation that happens? And can you talk a little bit about those records?
Yeah, definitely. So all of our staff that work directly with the kids, and I'll say most of our programs, some are a little different, but in general, they're required to complete at least one note about the child every day. Now we do train each staff in our format and the language of what they need to use during their first week on the job, but it's a fairly lengthy, talking about their treatment goals. So you have access to their treatment plans and their therapist notes, so you get to kind of collaborate digitally with their whole treatment team. But yeah, there is, you're writing at least a paragraph about, how did the child do? Were they able to utilize coping skills? If you did an activity, I ran a psychoeducation group on life skills. Were they able to participate? Did it meet their treatment goals? So it's not only proper writing, but it's also taking their treatment goals and translating it. So you're having to do a little comprehension and moving what you're reading about the kid into what their treatment is.
That makes perfect sense. And I also want to shout out to our attendees out there that as we're talking about these things, don't hesitate to fire any questions into that question and answer. We'll address those here quickly. But Emily, would you say as a staffing specialist, where do you spend the majority of your time? Is it on a computer, working on hard skills, or is it soft skills? What is it?
I spend almost my entire day in front of my computer, which at times can be really tough, but I'm on the phone with people. So during a busy recruiting time, which is usually about the end of summer and the beginning of summer is our heaviest times, I'm calling people all day. I'm taking notes on my computer of my phone calls. Right now, we're doing all of our interviews remotely with the pandemic. So I'm doing Zoom interviews with supervisors and potential applicants. I'm calling for references. I'm doing background checks. So I live in front of my computer right now. With that being said, I'm very lucky that I'm also able to run the social media accounts and do graphic design for the agency. So I also get to, if recruiting's a little bit slow or I have a break, I get to play on Facebook, play on Instagram, and so I live very digitally, which still requires people skills. I'm still interacting with the public, whether it's via a Facebook post or calling someone. Definitely, I'm still. People skills are important, but yeah, I live in front of my computer right now.
Yeah. So what about somebody that's on the floor working with those kiddos? What percentage of their day would you say? Lay that out. What's their biggest?
Probably if they have an 8-hour shift, the last maybe hour to an hour and a half is spent documenting. So for staff that work in our residential program, it's primarily second shift positions that they work. So the kids they go to bed about 9 o'clock at night, 8:30, depending on their age. And then the last hour and a half to 2 hours of your shift is spent doing your documentation, catching up on training, doing your emails, any kind of other tasks. So most of the time with our direct care staff, they're, not on the computer. They're working with the kids. They're in the classroom. They're, at the gym. They're in the units doing activities. So it's a very hands-on job. And our teachers the same. Therapists, it's probably about 50-50. They're meeting with their kids, whether it's virtual or in person right now, it just depends. They're meeting with their kids about half the time and then doing their documentation for the other half. So it's definitely, you need to have a familiarity with computers to work here, but we do train on the type of documentation. So it's a bonus if someone comes in with that experience, but we also are able to help them with that.
That's great. That's great. Great advice. So let me ask you this. In terms of education, walk us through a few of the positions there and what educational requirements are required for somebody entry level all the way up to that PhD or MD in psychiatrist in your position as well.
Yeah. So I'll just start with me because I have a kind of an interesting background that I like to share with high school students a lot, is that I actually have my bachelor's degree in dance performance. I was a professional ballet dancer prior to this role. So I have a background not related to my job at all, if you look on the surface. But then underneath, I have stress management, detail orientation, all these skills that I had to have as a professional ballet dancer have translated here. So in terms of that education, I have a bachelor's degree not related to my field that I'm working in. But with our positions, I'll start kind of from our high school entry level. So we do have staff that have high school degrees or GED equivalents, and that works for most of our direct care positions. So working either third shift, first or second shift in the classroom or in a residential unit. And then we do have bachelor's level and associate's level in those positions as well. We do also have like refocus rooms in different schools, and we do ask those employees have their bachelor's degree in a related field, particularly like psychology, sociology, criminal justice sometimes. Definitely looking at those types of education is good too. And then we also have for our therapists, we have licensed and non-licensed. So we're looking for a master's degree in family counseling, marriage counseling, different types of counseling. And then they can pursue their license like a clinical social worker or a licensed social worker. They can pursue those. We do have staff that start with us as a non-licensed therapist, and then they continue on and achieve their licensure through supervision with us. Our teachers, we do ask them to be certified, so we do look for teachers with either an early childhood, an elementary, or secondary education certification, and it's always a bonus for us if we find someone with a special ed certification they have gotten those skills that really work with our students. And a lot of universities now are pushing their students, like I know Edinburgh does a lot, and other universities are pushing for teachers to get a dual cert. So they would have maybe secondary mathematics and then special education. Our psychologists are licensed and they have their doctorates as well. We do have a doctoral internship program through the American Psychological Association here. So every year we do have 3 doctor interns that are almost done with their doctorate that come and work with us for a year. So, and then some of them funnel into staying with us as well. And then our PsyD as well we have, and then we have our MD, our medical director. So we, from the ground up, we really, and a lot of staff here, I mean, I'm pursuing my master's currently, a lot of staff do pursue education while they're with us as well.
We just had a great question come in from our audience, and we're going to get to that in a second. I want to encourage any other questions. One more question for you, Emily, is in terms of something that, well, let me back up for a second. If somebody comes to work at Sarah Reed, is there any kind of, what's the culture there for you to encourage you to go get additional education? You said you were working on your master's there. Does Sarah Reed encourage that, or?
So we definitely, part of our trauma-informed care model is growth and change. So we really promote a lot of internal training. We supply our staff with unlimited training, and then a lot of guest speakers coming in and just really trying to supplement everything. So internally, you're already getting a lot of education. We do offer tuition assistance for our employees. There are a few criteria, but they're able to receive a scholarship, and we do hand those out for all semesters, spring, summer, and fall. So we do have staff that are pursuing higher education, or there are staff like teachers and other licensed staff that do require continuing education credits that we'll pay for. So we definitely, it's a high priority, especially as times are changing. I think we're going to all see after this pandemic, the mental health services, the need for that is going to grow. So I think we're trying to keep up with the times. I know we're starting to see adults in our programs as well. So it's definitely, we are pushing for education. We do encourage our employees to continue their education. I know a lot of supervisors are flexible meeting their employees' school schedules. If they're finishing up their bachelor's or finishing up their master's, they'll maybe switch a shift so they can take a class. So we definitely recognize the importance of education.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's every professional we've connected, that's the same message, is that grow yourself. And for all of our attendees out there and anybody watching the recording, think about it, when and if you graduate, if you want to jump into, some form of post-secondary education, you could go to work entry level for an organization like Sarah Reed or U.S. Steel we were talking with yesterday, and they pay for your schooling. And like Emily was talking about, imagine there's just like a stipulation that you have to work with us for maybe a couple of years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ours did stay with us for a year. And I think I think my experience is a perfect example where I pursued a whole different career and now I'm on my second career. So maybe you get your undergrad in something, you pursue a certain path, you start working and you find that you love something else. So that's where secondary education or any kind of continuing education, whether it's a certification or a master's degree, is so important. And keep yourself open to pursuing something that may be off your path. I think that, things change and you find different passions as you grow up. So just keep your mind open to different opportunities.
So share with us something fun. If you're standing in an elevator and somebody says, "Hey, what do you do? What's something rewarding, or something funny, or something entertaining you've experienced in your career?"
I love the people I work with, both in my department and across this agency. I'm so lucky to have amazing coworkers we take our jobs very seriously, but we know when to have fun and to kind of laugh and relax. And I think the best part and most fun part of my job right now, especially, is trying to come up with creative ways to keep morale up and keep staff, feeling energized. It's a tough time right now. We're essential workers. A lot of our staff have been picking up overtime and just really, haven't had a break. So how do we come up with creative ways to keep people motivated? So I know we're doing different challenges across the agency. So just being able to connect with coworkers that I maybe don't interact with often. So I think it's just the people you work with make your job enjoyable.
That's awesome. That's awesome. It's super important to have people like that around. So you mentioned that you're an essential organization. So that means that your staff are there face to face. We had a great question come in. How has this pandemic affected that face-to-face interaction with your specialists and your students? What kind of adaptations have you guys done?
Definitely. So to start off, our residential program has never closed. We have stayed open, and our kids have stayed here, and we've made adaptations to things here, but that has not really changed. Sometimes therapy is remote, but that stayed the same. In terms of our school programs, in March, when we thought we were just going to close for 2 weeks and then we reopened, we realized that wasn't the case as the pandemic grew. So we pivoted very quickly and we did virtual learning in many of our programs. So we had teachers using different platforms, and it just depends on the school district, reaching out. We had therapists calling kids, driving to their house, dropping off packets, doing Zoom sessions. So we've really had to change telehealth, which is, telehealth for mental health has not been a huge priority of the state, and I think now it's going to be addressed and keep that going. But we've had, outpatient therapists Zooming in new clients and working. So we have had to change, but I think it's a good change. We're able to connect with people on their better schedule, but we are doing a lot of remote work. I think the education is the toughest piece that we've had to pivot with. But again, using those platforms like Google Classroom or Schoology or things like that, our teachers have really come up with creative and innovative ways to reach their students in a virtual world. So we're still working on some different ideas, but it's definitely an adjustment for everyone, students and staff alike.
Yeah, so we're coming up here on about 9 months of this pandemic. So, yeah, I know. And what kind of, I guess you hear this, but what kind of anticipated impact will this have on people? What are they saying? I mean, have you had any conversation with folks about that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing right now, in terms of new clients or children coming into us, we're seeing that right now it's tough to get those services in the home. You're not going to maybe have your TSS come to your house because of the pandemic. So we're seeing kids struggle. I mean, students that may have been fine in a school setting are now struggling with remote learning. So we're dealing with those challenges and the associated mental health difficulties, the stress, the anxiety. Also, there's a loneliness factor. You have students in isolation, they're away from their friends, so we're seeing depression increases. I think the impact of this pandemic will last, I would say, personally, I would say probably another year or two beyond when we start going back to normal. I think the mental health component, and I think there's a bigger focus though, so I'm hoping that means that more people will feel comfortable asking for services and reaching out, whether it's through their school district or their other services that they currently receive, to get more services if need be.
Yeah, and there's for one reason or another been a stigma around needing help for mental services, and that's not the case, because everybody in the world is dealing with this, and not only that, traumatic events that have happened in their life. Everybody's dealing with the pandemic, so it's always okay, and it's always reassuring to know that there's somebody out there that can help you.
Absolutely, and I think it may be easier for us because we're working with kids where we're starting to see the onset of these difficulties. But as we are expanding to adult services in our outpatient behavioral health clinic, we're seeing that these adults have been struggling since childhood with certain things, and now they're just really coming to a head with the extra additional stress of the pandemic. So I think we encourage our staff as well as the clients we work with to ask for help if they need it, because everybody does need a little bit of help.
Sure. There's nothing wrong with that. So let me ask you a question we always get. If somebody was interested in going into your line of work at Sarah Reed, what's some classes or some things that they could explore in their high school, maybe it's 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th? What are some classes that they could pay particular attention to and determine if this is the right fit for them?
Yeah, so if they're looking at a career, I'll speak broadly about careers at Sarah Reed as opposed to just my individual. So if they're looking to maybe work in the mental health field, psychology, most high schools offer a psychology class. So trying to get into a psych class, if there's sociology available, offering that, like a health class even. It's been a little bit since I've been in high school, so I'm not sure, and I am from a different state, so different classes available. But I think psychology, because you're going to learn about different diagnoses, different treatments, and kind of just a broad overview. And that can tell you if you're interested in that, then you'll be interested. But if that bores you or you hate that class, then maybe this is not the right field for you. I think also for folks that are interested in education, if there's a way you can do kind of a co-op, something working with kids, finding a way where you can work with kids. I think, a lot of our staff, even through high school babysitting, or if they were working at a daycare or working at a summer camp, we look for people that have had those experiences, coaching at the Y or something like that. So exposing yourself to opportunities where you can work with kids in a professional setting as well.
That's great advice. Yeah, it's not everybody's cut out for that type of life. The education component and that drive to help kids and be social, it takes a certain type of individual. So I want to respect your time, Emily. We're coming up on about a half of an hour. In terms of advice for maybe somebody on the cusp of graduating or maybe in middle school, what kind of a parting words would you like to share with our audience?
I think, especially as you're moving into these transitions can be tough, whether it's middle to high school or high school to post-high school, whether that's college or career, whatever that looks like for you. I think transitions are tough, so give yourself grace, especially right now. It's a tough time. So definitely be patient with yourself, but also don't be afraid to try new things or step outside of your comfort zone. So whether that's you're moving to high school and you're gonna, try and make friends with new people, or join a club or join a sports team that you may not have done in the past. Or if you're leaving high school, is it, taking a class somewhere? Is it getting a first job? Just don't be afraid to take those risks, because you'll regret not taking those as opposed to taking them. Even if it doesn't pan out, you're gonna learn something. So just step outside your comfort zone a little bit.
That's great advice. I want to say a special thank you to everybody that connected with us this morning, and a special thank you to Emily for spending time with us this morning. This session was recorded, and it will be posted on our website. And if you have an opportunity, jump out to Sarah Reed's website. If you do a simple Google search of Sarah Reed Children's Center, there's their website there. It's very informational, and you can find a lot of stuff there. So I want to say thanks to Emily, and thanks to everybody that's connected, and have a wonderful day.